Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Today is an awesome day because it is the day that the Lord has made, and we are excited to be back together because as you all have been watching the show, I think the last 2 weeks, one of us have been missing.
Absolutely.
So we thank God.
We weren't missing, we just weren't here.
But we thank God for everyone who sat in on our behalf to keep the show going. And we really, really appreciate your support of the show. The numbers are growing every week, and we're trying to make sure that we have relevant topics and conversations that's important to us. Mm-hmm. And so thank you all for the ideas. Thank you for your continued viewership and support every week. And of course, I am Dr. Sharon Cradle, and I am the oldest of this dynamic sister duo.
And of course, I am Sherelle Higgins, and I am the favorite of this dynamic duo.
And as I always say, I just let her have that. That's what the oldest do.
And I always say we can go with it. We can go with it this Sunday and every Sunday.
Yes. How excited are you all about the season that we're in? The season that we're in for a lot of reasons. You know, just how good God is.
Absolutely.
Right? For our health, for our families, for, you know, having a peace of mind. And if you don't have those things, you know, you need to focus on those and pray about those things so that you can have those things in your life, because we know that we live in some interesting times. And that leads us up to what we're going to talk about today. And
Sharon said something very important. Peace of mind.
Yes.
If you don't have a peace of mind, somebody need to move, right? If you don't have no
but what
peace,
if they live by themselves?
Then you need to move from yourself and rediscover your new self.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, you know, as we do always, we always start with scripture. And what I just want to say is, God is just good all the time.
Yes.
And all the time, God is good. And no matter what our visual eyes see in this world, we know that God is in control.
Absolutely.
Right? And if we know that God is in control, then we shouldn't be hoodwinked by anything that's going on in this world. We got to believe that what he has for us is for us, but we got to do our part.
Absolutely.
We got to do our part. And that's just where I really want to go today. We're going to talk about the debates. And hopefully everyone under our listening voices has had an opportunity to look at all of the debates, some of the debates, and we would love for you to call in to have this conversation with us. We're expecting some folks to come into the studio, some young folks, because when you really think about it, that's who this is really all about, setting it up for their future. And we're going to have someone else, Dr. Yolanda, I think, is still going to come and join us today. And so we are excited to be here. And I know Sherelle wanted to start off by talking about her weekend.
Yes, you gonna read the scripture first, or you gonna?
I just said God is good all the time.
All right, well, hey, let's roll with it. Yes. So actually, I'm gonna back up a little bit before the weekend. Last week I was in Vegas, and I had no idea I knew so many people who lived in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
And so I had an opportunity to spend some time with some childhood friends. We were invited. Jackie, my sister Jackie, met me in Vegas, and so we were invited to. First of all, we started hanging out with Tom Tanya. Tanya is the cousin of Carolyn Brain of the
wow,
Brain family.
yes.
And so she came, she hung out with us. We went out to eat. We just kind of kicked it. And then me, Jackie, and Tanya went to Jerry Pruitt's house. And
Yes.
Jerry Pruitt went to Paul Robeson with us. And her brother was Mickey Pruitt, and her dad was Coach Pruitt. And her dad was so fine, y'all, back in high school. All the girls had a crush on him. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's the truth.
And so we went to her house. She cooked out, and we just had a great
awesome.
time.
Yeah.
And then, unbeknownst to me, Hattie Green lives in Vegas.
Does she?
Yes. And so I got an opportunity to go hang out with her.
Wow.
Hattie Green grew up on the same block we
She
grew
sure
up
did.
with. It was the Green family. It was about 9 or 10 of
10 of
them
them,
for
yes.
kids, plus
Yes.
the mother and father. So it was quite a
Yes.
bit of them. And Hattie Green was the older sister of one. Look, I'm going to say it like this, right? Because my husband in the studio, one of my first boyfriends, because he was one of my first boyfriends too. Okay, we're going to go with that. So she was the older sister of him and also of my childhood best friend, Lisa. And so it was good to hang out with her. And we were kind of reminiscing, and I told her, I said, I remember the blizzard of 79. Her mom called us and called me and told me to go to the store for her. And I, in hindsight, was kind of wondering why she called me when she had 9 of her own kids. But I couldn't answer that question. Me and Jackie put on our snowsuits, we suited up, and we went on to the store, right? Because we didn't want no trouble. So that was just a great memory that I had. And then, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to visit with cousin Irvine on my dad's side. She also lives in Vegas. She and I text back and forth, but I didn't get a chance to run into her. So, cousin Irvine, I love you just the same. And so Vegas was great. So I came back from Vegas. I got home Friday morning. It was after midnight. So I got home Friday morning, had to pack up and hang out with my Virginia State family for the weekend, which is always a great time. So Friday night was a Virginia State meet and greet, an all-white party with a splash of orange or blue. So, of course, we all looked fabulous in our all white. And we just had such a great time, just, again, getting reconnected. We always stay connected and do Virginia State things.
Yes.
And so we just it was some new faces this year for the meet and greet. So that was great. So it was good to see, other people come out and enjoy. And then we also had a vendor there. Who was selling earrings and necklaces. Her jewelry is just simply beautiful. It's leather, and it had different designs on it. And so, of course, I patronized her because, of course, I need more jewelry, right?
Is she a Virginia State graduate?
I don't know if she was a Virginia State graduate. And so that was great. And then yesterday was the Vikings and Friends picnic or a cookout. Let's not call it a picnic, a cookout. And of course it was like 215 degrees outside yesterday, but it did not stop us from coming together and enjoying each other's company.
And so tell our listening audience who are not familiar with the Vikings, what kind of group is the Vikings?
The Vikings is a social group. It's a group of fellas who I'm not really sure how they started, but a group of fellas at Virginia State just kind of came together and created this social group. I'm guessing, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that the reason why they created this social group is because either A, they didn't want to pledge a fraternity, or they didn't have the grades to pledge a fraternity, right? So, that's just is what it is. And these guys, they stay connected and they stay together, and throughout the year they put on different events. And so they always host this weekend, the last weekend of June, they always host a cookout. And so there were, I'd venture to say, 200 people at the cookout. So they had a great turnout, even though it was like 250 degrees. I'm still sweating from yesterday because I'm having a serious hot flash right now. And so, and then to cap the weekend off, last night, Adrian, 50 years of glamour birthday party.
Yeah, it was fabulous. Happy birthday.
Yes, happy birthday,
Welcome
Adrian.
to the club, Adrian.
Yes. And so Jim and I had a full weekend. And it's always great to hang out with my sister friend Diane and my brother
And they're
Hurley.
in the studio
and
with
they're
us
in
today.
the studio with us today.
All the
And
way from Chesterfield, Virginia.
yes, and Hurley said, I'm not going to be on that show.
Well, we're going to have Diane up here. Hopefully she'll come and join us.
It's all good, though. You
Yes.
know, we have some friends that shy, in front of the
Yes.
camera. We'll work with that. But that don't mean we won't call them out.
Yes. And can I tell you something? As Sherelle was talking, as you get older, things just go by so quickly. Sometimes you just got to stop and think, now, what did I do when I got off work on Friday?
Right.
Because it's just all kind of muddy.
Right,
And when your
exactly.
weekends are so full and busy, it's just kind of hard sometimes to just kind of tease it out because we're trying to fit so much in. And so we have our husbands are here today, Ira and Jim, so hopefully they'll be able to tune in. And this conversation is for all of us, right? And there are no right or wrong answers. And we really need to have a conversation because, we need to know from our audience what's important to you in this election. Is it just that you want somebody to win?
But hold on,
Okay.
I'm sorry. One other person in Vegas,
Oh.
somebody I grew up with, Dan, from 62nd and
Oh,
Marshville,
wow.
live in Vegas. He came to the hotel, kicked it with us for a few hours. We had some good laughs. So, yeah, let me not leave Dan out because Dan is my man. Go ahead.
Yes, and so you can tell fond memories of growing up on the
Yes.
south side of Chicago. And so we really want to have a conversation about the two debates. And as I mentioned at the onset of the show, we're going to have a younger person to come in, and I think we're going to call another younger person because I don't think he can come in physically, but because really when you start thinking about it, when I say younger, they're both in their 20s, and really get some idea from them in terms of what is it that they're looking for in a candidate, what are the most important issues for them, and we want to really have a conversation and break this thing down about, where do we go? Where do we go from here? Who do you support and why? And there are no right or wrong answers because we all have our, opinions. But one of the things I will say is that if you are on the Democratic side, let's be very specific, we need to have a plan.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We have got to come together about what we believe the issues are, the most pressing issues are for us in our world moving forward. We need to know, what's important to you as you, from a local standpoint, and and how is this going to impact you personally in your home? I think all of those things are so very important to talk about. And so
And our plan can't just be, let's just beat Donald Trump. It can't be that simple.
Right.
we need a real plan.
Yes. And who establishes the plan, right? And those of you that are voting on the Democratic side, what do you think the plan should be? And if you want to call in, we really would love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you and have you to call into the show. It's 833-202-TALK. And, of course, we have all of our social media followers. If you're not comfortable calling into the show, if you type a question in, then we will do our best to answer the question. So we are living in some very interesting times, as we all know. And we each have to think about what's important to us individually and then collectively, and what do we hope for the future? What do we want our footprint to be for the future when we're no longer here? For your children's children, for your for whomever, for your family, for your loved ones. We have really got to think about it, and this is serious business. It is serious business in terms of what's important for the legacy of our country and of our families. And we have to have some common, right? Some common thoughts, some common movements, and work together to make sure that we press upon whoever the nominee is going to be what's important to us. And we know that once they get in office, they cannot do everything.
Right.
They just can't.
Right.
So How many of you all watch the debates? All of our Facebook followers, anybody that calls in.
Yes, let us know.
Let us know. How many of you all literally watch the debates?
So I will tell you, I was in Vegas and I started watching the debate the first night and caught some of it. I didn't catch all of it. And then the second night, I was on a flight back from Vegas, so I didn't see any of it. But I have seen some of the highlights and some of the clips. And because I watch politics all the time, I'm pretty in tune to, what the candidates' positions are and what their blind spots are. So I don't think that watching the debate was going to change my perception that much about the candidates.
So we know that we had two debates because there's 20 plus candidates, 21, 22 candidates, particularly on the Democratic side. And I want to talk about the Republican side a little bit because I don't think people are talking about this piece, and I'll come back to that. But we have around 21, 22 people running for office. I think that's exciting, to be very honest with you. It's crowded, but I think it's exciting that people are energized and are taking this next election very seriously, that they want to be a part of the solution, okay? And so, we had, I think there was one debate on Tuesday night, and then the next one was on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And so what they did was they randomly selected who was going to participate on each night. And to be very honest with you, I thought it was a great mix of folks, in terms of who was on the platform.
I thought all of the heavy hitters was on the second night, though.
And they said they randomly.
I know it was random, but most of the heavy hitters, with the exception of Elizabeth Warren, was on the second night.
Yes.
Although I did appreciate the Spanish challenge in the first night.
Oh, that was interesting. We're going to get to that. We'll get to that. And so what I liked about it is, of course, people don't, those candidates don't have enough time to really share everything that they want. That's why we have to do some reading ourselves and follow and support, a candidate of choice. And then there's a lot of chat groups out here, which are very interesting, right? And so you don't know if they're trolls. You don't know who these folks are in these chat groups, but you have to be very clear about, what you believe, what you want them to focus on, and at least be focused, because we know that in the last presidential election, there were 60 million people who set out and did not participate in the process. Let me say that again. 60 million people set out and did not participate in the process. And it's just mind-boggling to me, right? It's mind-boggling to me why we wouldn't do that. So why people would just sit out. And I think some people, whichever candidate they were supporting, particularly on the Democratic side, they were like, okay, I'm not participating. My person is not on stage. I don't care. And this is, I think, part of the reason in terms of why we are where we are, because so many of us set out and did not participate.
Well, I think, too, we tend to let the media dictate the narrative, right? And one of the things that just grated on my soul during the last election was the whole notion that somebody was going to be voting for the lesser of the two evils. That wasn't my narrative.
Right.
But yet people who look like me allowed the media to make it their narrative. And I started hearing us repeat that. And when we started repeating that, we started believing it. And that kept us from going to the polls because we didn't want to vote for the lesser of the two evils. Right. And I'm like, that is crazy. So don't let the media, I mean, it's good. I listen to the media just like you do, but they don't get to dictate my stance. They don't get to dictate my narrative. And they don't dictate my support for a candidate or my non-support for a candidate. So we have to do our own reading and research so that we understand who we're voting for. And let's just get this clear right now. There is not one candidate on the planet Earth
that's perfect
that is perfect and don't have some stuff with them.
Exactly.
And so if you immediately start picking apart what they did wrong in your perception, you won't vote for anybody. So instead of doing that, let's assume that you don't have all of the facts as to why they did what they did, and let's just focus on the positive and figure out what we want these candidates to do for us and who's more likely to do it for us. Don't start with the, oh, well, you know, she had this issue, so I can't vote for her. Everybody has an issue, including you. Everybody got an issue. And so let's not let that drive whether or not we go to the polls and vote.
That's exactly right, because everyone has a challenge.
Absolutely.
And we have to come together collectively. And I think we'll do that at the end, because for what I know, particularly for African American women, we came together the last time. We didn't have like a conversation. It was about what we thought was for the best for the country in moving us forward, right? And so that's just where we are. And what I love about our election process in the cycle is that anybody can kind of run if you meet the criteria, right? And so we have such an eclectic group of people running from race, from gender, just all kind of backgrounds, business backgrounds, everything. And I just think that's just powerful. And I think that's giving us a message that people are ready to see some progression in the country.
Hold on. Let's talk about that, because I told you I'm very passionate about this topic. We went to the polls for the presidential election. We didn't show up in the polls for these local elections.
Right. We're going. Yes.
We didn't show up for those. We didn't show up for those elections. And as a result of that, here's what we have. We have Alabama abolishing abortions.
Yes.
We have Missouri abolishing abortions. We have people gerrymandering. And in case you hadn't looked at the latest from the Supreme Court, who said that it's okay to do that. These are the people that we are not voting for in our local elections. And these people they're tearing our communities up. And so while we may put a lot of focus around the presidential election, trust and believe these local elections are so much more important, because they dictate how we live, what we can do, and how we do it. On a national scale, abortions are still legal, but not. You know, we still have a right to choose on a national level, but in some of these states, not so much. You know, so if you don't show up, you know, we had an election in our community a couple weeks ago. When I tell you, when we just walked in, it was nobody there.
Right, exactly.
It was nobody there.
And people are feeling, you know, I don't know if they feel disenfranchised or they just don't feel connected, or maybe it's just overwhelming. And I've said this on the show before. I am an elections judge where I live. And I was blown away at the last election, because people were just trickling in. But 4 years prior, it was, lines were wrapped around the building. And so something happened.
People don't understand the process.
Something happened that kept people from going out to vote.
People don't understand the process. People don't understand that your local election is majority vote, and the presidential election is the electoral college. People don't understand that, because when they was teaching us that in elementary school, it didn't mean nothing to us, because it wasn't something that we were immediately going to be involved in. We don't understand as Americans how our government works. And so because we lack the knowledge in how it works, we choose not to participate in the process. So let me say this again. Local elections,
that's it,
majority vote.
Yes.
500 versus 200. Guess who win? Person with 500. Electoral, the presidential election. It's not majority vote, because if it was, Hillary Clinton would be our president.
That's right.
It's the electoral college. So we need to know who's making those votes on those electoral college boards, and how do we get to them and tell them who we want them to vote for. That's how that works. And so we got to get involved. We got to educate ourselves. And that's what this show is about, is to really educate people about how our government works. People just don't understand. If you understood how our government works, and you understood how many vacant political positions there are in this country, you would be horrified.
Yes.
If you understood that at some agencies that deal with immigration don't have a permanent immigration head, they shifting people through there like clockwork, you would be horrified. And you would understand that the last person who was acting in that position stepped down because he didn't approve of what direction we was going in with these kids at the border. Mm-hmm. We need to get involved. We need to educate ourselves. We need to make some demands. And if people are not prepared to meet our demands, we are not prepared to vote for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things, so there's so much to talk about as we talk about this particular topic. And today, what we want to do is really kind of stay focused on the two debates that happened and get some commentary around what's important to people. Mm-hmm. Because what I can imagine, I'm an educator, what I can imagine is that when you have 20 plus people talking at you, it's just kind of hard to really tease out what's important, right, and what they're saying. And so we know what Sherelle said about the Supreme Court, making that decision. They just decided they're not going to make the decision. They sent it back. Right. And so those are very important. And what is that telling you? Mm-hmm. What is that telling you about, where we are and what's happening? And so it's so important, and it's information overload. And so when you look at the Democratic candidates, if you're a Democrat, if you look at the Democratic candidates, or if you tend to lean that way in terms of voting, the platforms are basically the same. Mm-hmm. They all are really talking about some same things, maybe with a little different twist. And so what is it that makes you, as a voter, take notice? What's important to you in terms of what's important to your children's future? What's important to your future as you get older? Right? And so we have to listen, and most of them are basically talking about the same thing. Mm-hmm. So if they're basically talking about the same thing, then what is going to be the deciding factor for you as a voter to make you vote? And I was talking to some people recently, and some people are just saying, we just need Donald Trump out of office. If you're on the Democrat side, we just need him out of office. But what does that look like? How are you going to get him out of office? So are you saying that you're going to vote for any of the Democratic candidates? And they're like, absolutely yes. They're like, absolutely yes. It really doesn't matter to them. And so a lot of people are disengaged from the process because I think it's overwhelming. And then they have decided it really doesn't matter if I'm voting Democrat, whoever it is, I'm going to vote for the person, regardless to whether or not I understand what their policies are. And hold on, we have a call already. And so we're going to take our caller. Let's make sure everything is live. Hello, caller. Welcome to Sisters in Company, talking about it.
Hello, sisters. This is your brother, Philip, calling from Chicago.
Hi, Phil. How are you?
You know what? I'm listening to the conversation, and what's missing is, I'm thinking about, Clarence Thomas, Thurgood Marshall's place on the Supreme Court. And Clarence Thomas seems like he does not love black people. He has no love. Barack Obama was the first black president, and after, 2 terms, it's a lot of talk. He didn't do much for black people. He didn't do exactly things that he said he was going to do for black people. So I guess I'm trying to point to the fact that a lot of us sitting on this, the voters, especially black voters, we vote people in, but we don't get love back. We don't, as far as in their bills or in their activities towards black people to help, and whatever it is, or so I guess I'm just, I'm not getting the love back from our black politicians that I think is necessary for us to, like you said, a lot of people sat out, especially when it came to Hillary Clinton and Trump. But again, we just don't have politicians that saying, okay, we're going to do this specifically for black people, and then go in and do it. And once that starts, then maybe, we can see some of the results that all our efforts in voting and things like that would bring about.
So let me just say this. And thank you for that.
At the bit.
Yeah, thank you for that, Phil. Well, what I do know for sure is that we know that President Obama, of course, was the first black president, right? African American president, and you have to think about the time that he came in and what was happening in this country. We were probably about to go into a depression, right?
We were in a depression.
Yeah, and so he had to make some choices about what was
Priorities.
important to save this country, right? Economically, politically, and from my perspective, he did a whole lot. And what I believe is that people are not reading, people are not following, whether you agreed with what he did or not. He did a whole lot to bring us back from the brink, and he had to make some decisions. And so I am definitely a President Obama supporter. There's a lot of information, and people are not reading. They just feel like what they hear,
That's
and
the
they go
narrative
on
the
what they
media
hear.
told us.
Exactly.
Is that he
That's
didn't do nothing for
exactly
black
right.
people.
Exactly.
But let me tell you what black people didn't do for him.
Yes.
They didn't show up for those Senate races. They didn't show up for them House races.
Yes.
So they put him in office, but they didn't show
And
up.
he asked.
And they didn't give him the House and the Senate
Yep.
so that he could do the things that he needed to do for the black community.
Yeah.
We went to the presidential election, and then we sat home.
Yes.
And then we said, okay, well, now that he's in office, okay, what are you going to do for us?
And I remember him saying, make me do it. Give me some pressure to do this so that he, wouldn't be coming across as if it's just his idea.
Absolutely.
And so I think he was the right person for the right job at the right time for where we were in this country. And so we have to take some ownership as electorates. We have to, in terms of voters, we have to take some ownership in terms of our role and what we did and did not do. And so I think that's where we are now. I think people hopefully are getting the point about what's important, because it's not like these people are just going to go there. We're the voters. We're citizens. We kind of drive the direction of where we want the country to go. Where do you want this country to go? And it can't just be for selfish reasons. It can't just be about you. It has to be about not only you, but what is for the good, what you believe is for the good of this country. And where do you want your great grandchildren and their children to be in the future?
So let's have real talk, right? I told y'all this whole topic. Sharon coming from the debate perspective, I'm just gonna be interjecting some stuff. But let's have real talk. Let me ask
Phil. Phil, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, no, I think you all are touching on it, but I hear you saying that we need to be educated and, as voters and as consumers in politics. We need to re-educated on really, like you talked about, the state races and the House races and
those are the important ones.
Attorneys and people like that. And so once we get because I've been reading the Miseducation of the Negro just recently, and so a lot of our miseducation is very evident in a lot of areas of black life. So once especially when it comes to politics, I think once we get educated or we seek to get educated, try to get educated, shows like this and others and certain books would help us collectively become a better consumer or politically, when it comes to political science, better voters and participators.
And you're right. And I think we cannot just sit around and let people dictate to us what we should think. Right. And in this country, we get to talk about and be a part of a process, right? Without ridicule, without having to go to jail because we spoke our minds. This is a democracy, and so we get to. But I do know and I do understand there's information overload for a lot of people. And so where are you getting your news from? What's important to you and your community? Because it just cannot be about us as individuals. It has to be about the larger segment of society.
I think it's about both, right? I think a major part of it is what are we doing for ourselves? Right? These politicians, that's their job. That's what they do, right?
Yes. We put them in office to do certain things.
Yeah, we absolutely do. But if we don't give them the infrastructure to get those things accomplished, then they're just politicians, right? But what are we doing for ourselves? We have to make different choices. We have to choose that we want a different path for our lives. We have to choose that we want a different path for our kids' lives. Yes, politicians could put certain things in place to make it easier, like forgiving student loan debt, because that is out of control. the average person coming out of undergrads with $100,000 worth of student loan debt, that's crazy. They're not even gonna have a job that's gonna pay them that much money. It will take them 10 years or more to pay that back at $1,500 a month. Like, that is ridiculous. And so, yes, they could put things in place, but even if they put those things in place, are we gonna put the guns down and stop shooting people? Are we gonna stop killing each other because they forgiving student loan debt? Are we gonna put the guns down because abortion remains legal in this country? No. So we got to start taking ownership of our communities ourselves and taking advantage of the things that they do put in place. And we don't do that. A lot of us sitting back waiting to see what somebody else gonna do for us, and we're not doing for ourselves. So, it has to be a balanced approach. And until we start looking at the balance and participating in both parts, we gonna have what we have. I don't care what the politicians put in place.
Well, I agree with Sherelle partially, but I believe that the system is set up to disenfranchise
Oh, absolutely
people.
It is.
And so it's only,
but we falling for it.
Well, I understand that, but what I'm saying is everybody's situation is not the same, right?
It's not.
Everyone's access is not the same, and we're fortunate that we have access to, let's just say, healthcare, good healthcare.
Absolutely.
Some people don't have access to that, and so they're not really thinking about necessarily what's happening politically. They're concerned about their health. They're concerned about how they're going to put food on the table for their families. And I think that's, it's such a hodgepodge of issues and concerns that's going on, but we still have to come together as a community to try to think about what is going to be the greater good, and where do we want to see our communities, our American citizens, our country go. This
is black folks vote for people for the greater good of the community, for the country, right? White people vote for them.
But that's for the greater good of the country.
No.
For them, that's how they see it. It's for the greater good of the country.
It couldn't be.
Yeah, and it's not just black folk, right? It's just not black folk, and so. But what I'm saying is that's exactly right. When you go back and you look at the numbers in terms of, how people voted in all the way back to the 60s, it's very clear that most people are voting party line. Right. And so they're not necessarily, and I would say for them, they think that that's for the best of the country, regardless to what it is. And because I don't have anyone who has an opposing view about what we're talking about, it's kind of hard for me to say why they do that. I have some ideas. People don't like change. People don't like change. People, they have strategies, these long-term strategies in place in terms of where they want to see the country go. And so I believe that we as American citizens, we have that right too, right? To think about where do we want the country to go and who's going to be the best candidate, since we have to elect someone.
Not the perfect candidate.
Right, who's going to be the best, because nobody is perfect.
Right, exactly.
No one is perfect. And I am of the mindset, and I'm going to bring her up in a minute, that our younger generation, we need to hear their voices, because, all of us are over 50.
And proud of it.
Exactly. And what is it that they see, for the future, and what do they want to happen in terms of how our democracy is going to operate in the future, and to hear their voices. So we'll bring her on in a minute. But let's get back to the debates. Are you still there, Phil? He hung up.
No, I'm just listening, and I'm appreciating all the words that I'm hearing. So I just encourage you all to keep going forward, and I'll be listening off the air. All right, y'all push the like button.
All right,
thank you.
Push the like button.
Thank you.
Okay, talk to y'all later.
Okay,
right.
Somebody on social media posted. So where do we recommend people? What do we recommend people do to get the information about the candidates? I recommend people read. I recommend people listen to different media outlets, because somewhere in the middle you're gonna figure out what the truth of the matter is. I don't look at the one that supports your views. Look at the ones that don't support your views, and you got to read a variety of different things. I read everyday politics every single day, and so you just gotta do your homework.
And I think you can go to each candidate's page.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Their official page, so
Right.
that you can get the information from what they have written and what they've posted, because we know that we're on information overload, no doubt about it. And so we all have to decide, and that's an individual thing in terms of what's important for this round of elections in this country and where we want it to go, because there's opposing views about where we should go, how we should get there, and
Right.
and what's going to be important for your children's children. And so we have to be educated. We have to become concerned. And that's why I wanted to bring a younger person on the show because, we are, up there in age now, and what we want, I think it may be a little different.
Absolutely.
From what the younger people want. And then how do we bring that together to help move this country forward?
Well, I tell you, I was listening to the show last week, and I love the idea that you had talking about reparations and laying out just options, right? And letting people choose what they want for generations to come for the next 400 years. So I think that's one great idea.
Yeah, that's just my opinion, right? And of course, just like I have an opinion, a whole lot of people have opinions. And what we have to do, particularly as voters, is respect each other's opinion, right? Because at the end of the day, we're going to have an election and people are going to vote the way they vote. But I think we need to be informed voters. And I know what I was disheartened by was the lack of participation in the voting process. And the reason I was so disheartened by it is because we know the history of this country. We know that people didn't always have the right to vote. They got the right to vote in the 60s. You follow what I'm saying?
And
so
imagine.
Black people, this is what I'm talking about. And so to not see people show up was just, it was really disheartening. And I didn't really talk to a whole lot of people, so I don't know why people didn't show up, but we can't do that this time.
They keep renewing the Voting Rights Act. Pay attention to that. They keep renewing it for us.
We're trying to change it. And
why is that
giving
not a
the
permanent
states
entitlement for us? And the minute they take that from us, everybody gonna be up in arms. The same ones that don't go to the polls gonna be up in arms talking about we should have the right to vote. We have to demand that becomes a part of the Constitution. We just have to demand that. We need another amendment so that it is not based on who's in office and what the Supreme Court looks like. Because this new Supreme Court, they shocking the heck out of a whole lot of people. But it's gonna be some stingers coming out of that court. And so we need to make sure that our rights are protected on a permanent basis.
But also, I think as individuals, we have to decide what's important to us. What do we think is important to us as individuals? And then what's important to the greater good of society for your children's children and their children. And as I mentioned, I believe I mentioned this last week, I believe that one of the greatest concerns that we have as a country is climate change. I just do. And the more I do research on it, I'm just very clear that we as human beings, if we don't take climate change seriously, we know that humans probably won't be able to survive it, because the humans, the earth is going to self-correct. It's going to do what it has to do to self-correct, because it's always been here. And so what's important? And I never thought about that until I started doing some reading and just kind of understanding. So what's important to you? It can't just be about the money in your pocket. It can't. It has to be, that can be part of it, but what else is there, about making sure that your children's children and their children can survive and be here long after we're gone, which is very important. And so what I did was I pulled up, before we do that, we're going to take a break because I want to bring our guest up and have a conversation with her, and we'll be back shortly. Because I know we're about to run out of time.
Woman, thou art great. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago.
So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by...
Welcome back, everyone, to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. And we're going to resume our conversation momentarily, but most of you who are our followers know who this beautiful young lady is. This is Alyssas Cradle, and she's my stepdaughter and my husband's daughter, and you're 26.
Yes.
26. And so we wanted her to come on the show because when you really think about the future, this is our future.
Right.
Okay. And before we get Alyssa's take on it, I really want to talk about, some of the candidates. And I literally wrote notes, and because there are so many of them, and so many of them had some wonderful things to say, right? And so we have to come together collectively, not only to think about what's good for us as individuals, but what's good for moving the country forward. So we know that we had quite a few people: Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, and Amy Klobuchar. And the reason I read those names because each of them had something to say that I was interested in. And so, Alyssa, this is really about your world, right? And how you want to see your world as a 26-year-old. What are you all thinking? What did you actually think about the debates? Did you watch them? And if so, what did you think? And what's important to you?
So I basically caught a snippet of the first debate, and I did watch the second debate mostly in its entirety. One thing I would say that I'm looking for, I don't want to speak for everybody in my generation, but I definitely hear it a lot coming from other people, is like the one thing that you said, climate change is a big, huge thing. You can even see like people in Washington, D.C. are already trying to, combat that issue with little things like paper straws, and things like charging for plastic bags, because all of that stuff ends up in the trash and in our oceans. And we know that there are so many different species that are dying out, and our planet is dying. And I truly believe that. So it's just kind of disheartening to have a president that doesn't even believe in science. But it's just interesting. That's one thing. Definitely the student loan debt. It just, a lot of people in other countries don't even have to pay for college. So it's just kind of crazy. I feel like if they can do it, why can't we just learn from others and pick up whatever they're putting down and bring it over here? Another thing that I'm passionate about is universal PreK in the public school system, also because I'm a teacher, and I teach in Oxon Hill, Maryland, and I also do daycare during the summers in Alexandria, and the difference between those children is wide. And these are 4-year-olds in Alexandria that are way already more advanced than the kids I have coming into kindergarten. And a lot of those kids that I teach are in a low economic status, and they can't afford pre-K, so they come into kindergarten literally not even knowing how to hold a pencil, let alone what it is. And it's just sad. So I think universal pre-K would definitely put everybody on a level playing field when they come into school. And it shouldn't just be if your kids go to private school or they're in a charter school, then they're going to be set. In public school, it's just kind of fend for yourself. other things I think of, which is why kind of like what Bernie is talking about, is because
Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders, yes.
Okay.
I like the burn.
The burn.
I like a lot of the candidates too, but legalizing marijuana, just because I've been around people that in situations where there are people out here doing cocaine and other kinds of drugs. I'm not going to say that's a race thing, but those people are not locked up. And there are people that are in those private schools, and we have our young black men behind bars over just petty crimes of marijuana when other states have already legalized it and decriminalized it. And it's just like, why are our men still locked up behind bars over this plant? I just think it's disheartening. And I think there's also research that shows that alcohol and cigarettes alone are cause far worse damage than marijuana does. But that's another thing that I just think it's certain things that just don't make sense. But that would be some of my main things. Oh, and the gun control, for sure, because they're shooting up our schools, and it doesn't make any sense.
So you talked about some things I think is very important, because we know, so we talked about climate, right? We talked about the environment, but you talked about the universal pre-K, which I think education should probably be the next thing on the list, because without an educated people, we can't make these changes that we need to make. And so when we talk about universal pre-K, are you versed enough on it to talk a little bit about what that means?
I would say, well, it basically is kind of just basically saying that every child can afford to go have a preschool program, because a lot of kids don't have that. You would think that everybody goes to daycare, but daycare is different than actual pre-K.
Right.
It doesn't have necessarily a curriculum involved with it, and daycare is basically just like, it can sometimes be like babysitting. Pre-K is preparing students for school, getting them to know about what's happening, because our curriculum, I can speak for PG County, is getting so jumped up. Like, my kindergartners take multiple choice question tests through various times of the year. And, back when I was in kindergarten, it was just about dramatic play and kitchen and everything like that. But now they're trying to compete. Yeah, we're trying to compete as a country with all these other countries. And so our curriculum requires our students to do more. And I've just noticed with my own kids that I have to start from the very basics of like numbers and letters, and it's the black and brown children that are not coming and not knowing, and it's kind of sad. It's just like, you've been in your mom's house or whatever for 4 years, and then yet you come back and you know every hip hop song on the radio, but you don't know how to read or how to write. And so then I have to start from the very bottom, and by the time you're finishing kindergarten, you've learned so much, but now it's time for first grade. And first grade is supposed to be on a whole nother level, but you basically just got to kindergarten, Whereas those other kids that I deal with in Alexandria, they're first of all, their parents expose them to different things. They take them out on different trips, and they talk to their children. And I think a lot of times when children are young, we don't feel like they need to necessarily be talked to, or we do the little baby talk thing with them, and that doesn't help them expand their vocabulary. I had a 4-year-old last week tell me the difference between African elephants and Asian elephants, and it's just because of exposure.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about too, for those of you who do not know, the northern Virginia area, and there may be some of the southern areas or communities of Prince George's County. So it's a socioeconomic thing, and so I think what I don't want to do is blame parents, because what I know for sure is that some parents are just working to survive, right? They're doing the best that they can, and they're entrusting their children to the school system or to childcare or whatever to do what they do. But we also know that parents play a role in educating their children as well. And so that's Alyssa's perspective, because she's working in two different worlds. So the education of our children is just very, very important. Knowing how to read, knowing how to comprehend. I mean, it's a lot to education. Right. And so those things are important. And Sherelle, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
I actually like the list that Alyssa came up with. I would add to that list the right to choose and health care for all.
Right, exactly.
I agree.
Yes, the health care for all is important. And why do you think it's important, Sherelle?
I mean, people, it's too much in our foods that's making people sick. and I don't care what color you are, is making people sick. And we need to be able to do some preventive maintenance on our bodies. And we need, once we come down with something, we need to be able to get that taken care of and get quality care, not just any kind of care, but quality care. And the more, if we could do that for our citizens, the less likely of things spreading, the less likely of us not being able to, conduct the research to figure out what's causing it and find the permanent cure for it. I just think people need health care, and pre-existing conditions, throw that out the window. Everybody have a pre-existing condition.
But what's so crazy about this conversation when we talk about food? Let's just talk about our food source. Yeah. Why do people have to choose about whether or not they have healthy food or bad food?
Right.
It's just amazing. And the cost of food and how food is processed. And I think I told this story one time before on the show, during the time of the economic downturn, when I was at the grocery store, parents were in the stores with their children, and they were just buying everything frozen, processed, because that's what they could afford. They wanted to make sure their children could eat, right? And it was no fault of their own. And so what that to me is a problem in the United States of America. We keep saying that we're the greatest country on earth, but how are we treating the citizens who live in the greatest country on earth? And so those things are so very important to talk about, because if we don't have our health, if we don't have our environment in check, then what we're talking about, it's not going to matter. It really is not going to matter, because what we know from science is that the earth is going to self-correct. That's just point blank. And we as human beings, we're not that dynamic, trust me, to survive it. And so we have to start doing things. And we see, a lot of movement in communities to go green, to start planting your own food, teaching people how to plant their own vegetables, not using any type of pesticides and things like that. So we have to come to a point that we think about not only what's important to us as individuals, but what's important to us collectively as a human race.
But the other thing with that is our lifestyles, most of us, our lifestyles are such that we don't have time, right, to be planting our own garden.
Right.
We need to be demanding that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, insist and make it against the law to put pesticides in our foods. That's what they should be doing, because not everybody have time. I know I can't plant a garden. That's just not going to happen, right? And so I'm going to go to the store and get my stuff with the pesticides in it. But the FDA should be making sure that our foods don't have pesticides in it.
And GMOs, like the
And
genetically
GMOs,
modified.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, how are you buying a watermelon when it's not watermelon season?
Exactly.
Exactly.
How does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? All the foods that's out of season.
That you can still get. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we know when we get it shipped from other countries sometimes too, but we understand
sometimes
that.
they have to use chemicals to expedite the growing process, and the fact that a large chicken now is not the same size as it was back in the 60s is because they're pumping all types of things into the meats and everything, and it's really kind of
right.
gross.
And so we as citizens, it's our country. We have to get involved. We really make the demands about what's important and what's not important to us. And, have you made your voice heard? And, I'm in some groups on social media, and it's just fascinating. I know that they're probably saying the same thing about me, but it's fascinating to listen to people and to hear what people are typing. And sometimes I'm like, is this real? Are you a real person? Because some people are so extreme, but that's just how people think. And we have to think about not only what's just important to us as individuals, but what's important to the greater good of our country and our world and the children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren that you're going to leave behind. And so when we come back, because the show is over already, when we come back, we're going to have a conversation about what's important to people, right? Because you see, I always have notes. They always joke me. I come prepared because
I'm using her notes to plan myself.
And so I come prepared to have that conversation. And when you think about the Democratic candidates, particularly, they're not too far off the mark from each other, to be very honest with you on the issues. And but people are out there, they're like, who's going to win? That's what people want to know. Who's going to win? And we know that there are two Republican candidates running. but you only hear about one, right? And so we need to pay attention, not just on this side, regardless, just about the politics in general. And we know that it's overwhelming, but I believe that this is a matter of life and death.
And we need to be able to rise above, right, and be able to call it out when we hear it or see it. And so
have an intelligent conversation.
Absolutely. I'm glad this is an internet show because this is how we're going to end this show. One of my Virginia State friends is a comedian, and the name of his show is That's That Bullshit. And that's what I want you to be able to say when you hear it on the TV coming from the media. So we're going to go ahead and say we out of here and remember, that's that bullshit. Have a good Sunday.